Are you tired of spending your time and money chasing strategy after strategy only to discover what worked 10, 5, or even 2 years ago is not working now? Things shift fast in the online space, and if you're not keeping up, you're getting left behind. It's time for something different. Welcome to the Marketing, Media, and Money Podcast, where every single episode will be jam-packed with proven, profitable strategies, behind-the-scenes secrets, and what's working now resources from industry experts and global influencers to help you scale your business, shorten your learning curve, and stand out in a crowded, noisy marketplace. And now, your host, award-winning marketing and media strategist, and international speaker, Patty Farmer.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the Marketing, Media, and Money Podcast. I'm looking forward to sharing yet another amazing industry expert with you today. And I am really excited about this expert because I've known her for quite a while, have got to spend a lot of time with her. We've shared stages together and have been at events together, and we have a lot of friends in the same circle too. So this is someone that I think you are really going to want to make sure you have your pen and paper out, and you're really going to want to make sure that you connect with her. But let me tell you a little bit about her first. So Veronica Crystal Young has over 30 years experience as an efficiency expert and healthcare manager. She's also an award-winning speaker, producer, actress, and author. And you may have seen her on episodes of The Golden Girls with Betty White, starring on stage in Broadway classic musicals like Sound of Music, South Pacific, and Annie Get Your Gun, or singing with the country band Crystal Whiskey. As CEO of the Hollywood-based Crystal Eyes Enterprises, she has produced TV series pilots and commercials, including the nature series TV Artscapes. Her speaking credits include the Harvard Club of Boston, NASDAQ, and recently Carnegie Hall, to name a few. And her new book, The Other Side of Pain, is a guidebook for reclaiming hope and happiness by releasing an abusive or traumatic past. So there's a lot we're going to talk about today. I am so thankful you're here with us today, Veronica. Thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, thanks so much, Patty. I'm really honored to be part of this. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. So let's just dive right in. I mean, you have a very varied career, right? And I love your nature artscapes. I think that's really wonderful. We're going to give everybody an opportunity to go check those out. But I really feel like you have done a lot of things, which I think is absolutely wonderful. And I have been a part of your circle as you have gone through that journey. So let's go back and talk a little bit about that. I mean, this varied past you have right now, I know that you are living your purpose and your passion, but it wasn't always that way. So could you tell us a little bit about your aha moment and how you really got to the point where you're actually getting to do what you know you were meant to do?
Totally. I totally will. And thanks for the opportunity again. I have a varied background and I've been in many directions in my life, as you can tell from my bio. But when I was younger, I really wanted to be the next Linda Ronstadt, performing and creating with passion. And I know you know this, the childhood past of years of sexual abuse and very low self-esteem results in a couple things, a really early marriage, dropping out of college, and going to work in the corporate world very young, at 19. And it was healthcare at that time. Simultaneously, of course, I worked as an actor and later started my production company to build some opportunity in that realm. So I was an overachiever nonetheless, and constantly trying to prove myself, which of course is a result of abuse. But I really was a woman of many directions in life. And I can tell you the courage and the power to make conscious choices free of guilt and the shame and the shackles of the past became my mission, became what I was striving for. And I guess my biggest aha moment was admitting and realizing that the beliefs and the stories I had made up about myself as a result of the abuse affected every aspect of my life. My corporate life, my personal life, and my drive for life, everything. From what I deserved, what I thought others thought of me, what I felt I could accomplish, much more. It affects everything. And I basically built a superwoman complex. Protection, that's protection from pain, the pain of that experience. And I vowed I wasn't going to let that experience define my life, because I really hadn't been aware of how it really had affected me. It affects, as I said, it affects your self-esteem. It creates hiding and shame and creates judgments about yourself and others, and need for validation, people pleasing, all of which carries over into any entrepreneurial spirit. And I had all those things. So after a lot of therapy, diving into books and seminars and programs and all that to build my self-awareness and really be honest with myself about, where I was and where I wanted to go, I realized the fear and the self-sabotage and all the roadblocks, really, I was placing in my own way. The abuse was past. I was now in a place where I could make my own choices, my own decisions. And I wanted to make sure those decisions were conscious. Those decisions were what I really wanted to do and weren't a result of were not a result of my feelings to be validated or my feelings to feel loved or any of that. I really wanted to be my choices, my conscious choices.
I think a lot of times, as a coach, when I am coaching people and you kind of look at what they've done, and you've had, like we've said, a very varied past, but there's kind of almost a pattern to it in a way. Do you feel, or do you think that maybe when you were doing all these other things, like the nature artscape, you're a photographer, so you're behind the camera. When you're music, you're part of a band, even though it's your band. When you're acting, you're playing somebody else. Those are all really, in different ways, different roles that you're playing. But in a way, you're kind of almost wearing a mask because you're somebody else, really.
Absolutely.
It is you, but yet you're somebody else too. And sometimes it's easier to do that than to come out and be our own authentic self with everything we've been through and then become what we were meant to be, which I see you doing now.
Absolutely, Patty. And that's a really good point. And one of the things that I always tell everybody is it's really interesting because I have been on stage in front of 1,500 people with a role. It was not me. It was a role. And I was playing a character. And I loved it. It was great, but it was not me. So yes, and in a way, it is a mask. And the interesting thing is, and a lot of what I've done in the past have been musicals, which were, like Sound of Music. I was Maria, and, all the leads. And I was somebody else. And that was very easy. But what I found when I started performing with my band, Crystal Whiskey, and doing country western, I was singing, but I was me. So it was a transition. It was kind of a transition. I was really a little afraid because, you are vulnerable and you're sharing who you are with the world, even though you may be doing covers or, other people's songs. You are really up there being vulnerable. It's you. You're not playing a role, so to speak. And the same goes for speaking, because I just started speaking 4 years ago publicly. And that was frightening as hell because I was not playing a part. I was being me, sharing my story and all the challenges of the past that was being carried over into my now, into my current situations. And that is being very vulnerable, and it was scary, very scary.
I agree with you. I think that when I became a speaker 8 years ago, I think I remember every single time I got on stage for the first year, I was sick, violently sick before I even got up there. But I kept waiting for somebody to stand up in the audience and call bullshit. It's like I just kept waiting for them to say that they didn't agree with me, which it took me a year for me to figure out I didn't need validation from somebody else. Mm-hmm. As a speaker, you're sharing your expertise. Not everybody in the world is going to agree with you, and that's okay. But it is totally different when you're a speaker. And I could see from someone, like I've known you for a while, someone who's singing, although as a singer, because I know your band, there is part of you that does have to come out because, you're interacting with the audience, but you are still in a way kind of playing a role. So as a speaker, it is very authentic, right? Because yes. You really, if you're going to be successful at it, you really have to open up and let them see who you are. So I think that is a totally different type of vulnerability. And then your book, well, your book, that's really vulnerable too. If somebody is writing a book where they're sharing any part of their life. But I'm going to tell you, I believe strongly that in the business environment we're in now, that consumers, they want that. They almost demand it. They are so tired of the BS and the marketing. Like I always tell people all the time, don't read your own press release, right? It's marketing and stuff. And so we want to get past that. Like we want to know the person, right? We want to know the person. So more than ever, it's important to do that. But you know what? I think it's really important too, because sometimes we think when we have to be perfect, we do our people a disservice, because when they're looking at you and they're thinking, oh, I can't do that, I could never do that. The reality really is, what we really want is for them to look at us and go, if you can do it, I can do it too.
Exactly. That's the biggest part of my book. And, when I went to start speaking 4 years ago, I had the same feelings you did. I was like, oh my gosh, someone's going to stand up in the audience and say, who are you to be speaking about this? What are your credentials? What's going on? I'm petrified of that. And it stopped me for a while. I have to be honest with you. And I have to share something with you too. There was 10 years ago, I wrote a chapter in a book, and that book is out there. The name of the book doesn't come to mind. I think I blocked it out of my memory.
It's okay.
It's on my website, but I remember sitting in a room of about 25 women who had contributed to this book. And my chapter was about powerful, purposeful living. And it really pretty much is along the same lines as my new book and, what I'm all about, which is about know your power of choice, know who you are to present to the world, and you're unique and beautiful, and go for it, right? And the reality is we had a male marketing person at the time. And when I stood up to share my story and say why I wanted to put this out there about the abuse and about how I think it's important that this out there, he basically told me, no one wants to hear that. And it shut me down. And I take full responsibility for it, because it shut me down. And I said, oh my God. And that was all my fears right in front of me. And it was tangible. And I went into hiding for 10 more years, because the belief that I had, I took on that belief. What he told me, I took on, and I believed it. I didn't have to, because it's not true. It was my fear. So it was really, really interesting. And when I realized that 5 years ago or so, I was like, oh my God, I cannot believe I have not done what I needed to do and what I meant to do because of one person saying something to me. And
now, that's amazing, yeah. And it happens so often too. I mean, I don't think people really realize it. I mean, since you're being vulnerable, I'll actually share a little vulnerable story too. Mm-hmm. One time I was at this event, and it was an event, and I had a good friend with me. Mm-hmm. And I would say there were probably about 60 people in the room, and almost all of them were women. There were probably like 4 men, and the person whose event it was male, but there just happened to be almost all women in the room. And he had us sitting at tables, right? And there was one man sitting at our table, and he was very, very handsome, probably about 35, super buff, looked like he worked out every single day. I mean, super buff. And he happened to be sitting to my right. Well, there was an exercise that the host was having us do. And so I looked at the thing. He said, oh yeah, we're going to give you 5 minutes, do this exercise. I looked at it. And when I was looking at it, I thought it was so powerful that in that moment, I thought, I can't do this in 5 minutes. I really wanted to dive into it. I just knew in my gut that this was going to be life-changing for me. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't want to write on the pages, right? I didn't want to mess it up. I was like, no, I don't want to mess it up. I can't wait to tonight to really dive into this. So I didn't. Well, when the 5 minutes was up, the host said, turn to your right, turn to your right and have a conversation with the person next to you about this exercise. So when I turned to the right, it was this guy. And I have to tell you, momentarily, I was like, so I said to him, I kind of explained to him what I just did, that, I was going to dive into it that night, blah, blah, blah. But that I was more than happy to serve him, right? I said, so while I really can't really tell you what I would have wrote, I'm more than happy to serve you and let you have all the time. Right? And here's what he said to me. I mean, to this day, it's amazing it didn't wipe me out. He looked at me and he said, well, what I think we should be talking about is why you didn't do the exercise. And I was like, what? I said, I just told you why I didn't do the exercise. He said, no, I don't think that's it. I think this has all to do with your weight. Like, we were at a business event. It wasn't a health and wellness event. And I was like, what? I was like, I didn't even know what to say to him. And and it was because he was this fitness buff guy, right? And I said, how did you get that out of that? And he said, well, that's what I think it is. And I think that's what we should be discussing. So because this is a G-rated podcast, I can't really tell you what I said to him. But let's just say that I put him in his place. And as it so happened, Suzanne Evans, if anybody knows who Suzanne Evans is, she happened to come over and said, what's the problem, Patty? And I told her, and she's not a small girl herself. She literally had him removed from the event. But then what happened, of course, is everybody wanted to know about it. And then everybody had to hear the story. And so, of course, that just shined the spotlight on it. And so, but I have to tell you, like, everybody rallied for me. But it was just like, who was he to decide that and to say that? And if I had not already been a speaker and had already dealt with all those things, he could have wiped me out by saying that to me. And I don't think people realize the words they use can really do that to somebody else. And they should be really, really careful what they say and what do you really have the right to do. But then going back to your story, I really feel like one of the most important things is to never give anybody else that power.
No, absolutely. That's why my whole tagline is know your power, because it's about, number one, knowing who you really are. And it's all about the choices you make. And that all comes from self-discovery and healing from the past, or any mistakes you feel you've made in the past, or abuse, or anything, being in some sort of, codependent narcissistic relationship or anything like that. All of that contributes to our beliefs about ourselves. And those limiting beliefs can stop us from, our drive or moving forward, and the fear that we have for, going forward in our business and in our life, period. And that it's just that self-awareness and uncovering those stories about ourselves or what other people are going to think about us is just really important. And you're right. Do not give that power to anybody else.
I think that is really, really important. And a lot of times people don't really realize that they're doing it. And I know it seems like we're actually really focusing on speaking, and we're really not, I think, in anything. But I do remember when I decided to become a speaker, that I watched I wanted to be a great speaker. To me, if I'm going to do anything, I wanted to be really good at it, right? That's just my personality. And so I started, watching everybody and stuff. And I remember thinking, oh, I needed to change me, and I need to wear what I call soap opera dresses, right? And I needed to be real eloquent, and I needed to make a statement and make a pregnant pause and do all these things that I thought I needed to do. And I started hiring all these speaker coaches and stuff. And finally, I had this really great coach who literally said to me, Patty, it isn't changing you to be what you think they need. It's speaking in front of people who need to hear it the way you say it. And that was a life changer, game changer for me. Probably one of the best pieces of advice. My speaking career would not be where it is today if she wouldn't have told me that. And it is so true.
Well, I think that ties into what I just heard the last 2 years from one of my speaking coaches. It's like, obviously, it's not about you. Now, yes, you're relaying your story, you're relaying your journey, your tidbits of life, whatever, but it isn't about you. It's about them.
Oh, yes, it's never about us.
It's never about you.
About them.
When we're always checking ourselves, right? We're always checking, at least I was. And still do, like you said, before I go on stage, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm nervous, blah, blah, blah. But, it's just, if you can change your focus from you, how you look, how you feel, what you're feeling about it, to they need this. They are going to get this. Then it really makes it, you're right. It is life-changing to have that shift.
It is. And it is the things that keep you back, what you think people are thinking about, right? Because believe me, based on what that guy said, everybody in your audience is not a size 5, right? You know, so,
Right.
so when you think about it, people come in all, you know, colors, sizes, you know, ethnicities. I mean, all of that, right? And so it's so funny that sometimes it'll take somebody who's not even in your industry to say something. Because when I went home and told my best friend that story, I can't tell you what she said either, but what she did say that was so funny is she's like, so what is your thing? Like, you know, she just really called me on it. And she's like, so what was your problem? Like, what are you thinking? And she actually said to me when I was telling her that I was worried about how I was going to show up on video and what was I going to look like in the pictures and all that kind of stuff. And pretty much she just said, why? Because you think that when they see you on social media, they think you're a size 5. And then when they see you on stage, you're like, oh my God, I thought you were a size 5. And it was so funny. And I laughed like, you know, I just laughed like crazy. And I thought, that is so silly. And she didn't even get it. She was like, I don't even get it, Patty. What are you trying to say? So, you know, sometimes we get caught in our own thing.
Oh,
right?
of course. We cannot be objective about our own stuff. I mean, it's difficult because, and you know, it's funny because a lot of times being honest with ourselves about where we really are and what is the fear, what is it really about? A lot of times it's just, we just don't want to put ourselves out there because we're afraid of what everybody else is going to think, period. That's it. And it's that simple, but it's that hard.
And then I think it goes back to something really important that I try to focus on all the time, which is what's your why? Like, why am I doing what I'm doing? You know, to this day, 8 years later as a speaker, right? I still don't like to get my picture taken. I never have a problem giving the microphone back. And I still don't really love video. But you're in business, right? And so you have to kind of get over yourself. But I think the thing you really have to realize is your why big enough to get past that, right? Why are you doing what you're doing? And I don't mean the little stuff. Oh, I'm doing this because I want to make this amount of money, or I'm doing it because of this. What is your really deep in your gut why? Why are you willing to pick up that phone? Why are you willing to do the things you're doing? And for me, my why comes down to time freedom. Everything for me, every decision I make in my business all comes down to, does this get me closer to time freedom? And that is what it is. So with that, that leads us right into a really great question. What's your why?
My why is, it's twofold, I believe. It is creating a space for people to know their power of choice, know the power of who they really are, to really open up, find out who they really are, and know that they are 100% love and 100% anything that they are, everyone else should have the honor of sharing of who they really are. And no masks, no hiding, no anything. Just be who you are. I remember there are some, you know, that word quirky that you hear thrown around, oh, that person's quirky or that person's. That is a wonderful compliment to me, because that means you're very authentic and very different from everybody else. And everybody needs to know there is something quirky about everybody. And why not share that with everybody? So
I love that. My husband has a phrase for that. Whenever I do something unique or quirky, I have this really, I don't want to say it's a bad habit. It's just a habit that whenever I'm re-saying a cliche, I'll always get it wrong. Like I never get it right. I'll always say it like how I think it makes sense to say it or whatever. And my husband just always looks at me and says, "You're so adorable."
Well, that's great, because now you've anchored adorable to quirky.
Right. It's like,
and that's great.
I love that. So I have a question, Veronica. So thinking about the story you shared in the beginning of your aha moment and how you went to work in corporate at 19, which is like amazing, and how you managed to do all these other things while you were doing that. If you could go back and talk to that 19-year-old Veronica, what would you tell yourself to do first or differently?
That's a really good question. I think the biggest thing for me would be honest with how I'm feeling and don't abandon yourself. What I mean by that is trust your intuition. Don't abandon what you really want because of what somebody else will think what somebody else will say, what your parents want, what your significant other want. I mean, don't abandon yourself, and don't abandon any feelings that you have by masking or by addicting or abandoning yourself by an addiction like, drinking and I didn't have that. My addiction was shopping. I'll just share that with you. My addiction was shopping to mask the pain of, what had happened. And when I was feeling badly or depressed or didn't know what I was going to do with my life, I would go shopping and it would momentarily be great. And then it would go right back. So I'm saying, feel your feelings, work through your feelings, and don't abandon what you really want in life. And just know your power, because I didn't feel like I had any. I didn't feel like I had any choices a lot when I was younger. And we do. And as you go through your life and you realize you do have a choice, and in those choices, you determine and you show the world who you are. And that's really important. And it's really important that we realize that the choices we make really show the world who we are, and to also give ourselves some grace if we have made mistakes, because we all have.
I say that to myself all the time. I'm like, Patty, just give yourself grace.
Right. You have to, we judge ourselves, and you know this too, we judge ourselves more than anybody. That little Fred, I named the voice in my head, Fred in my head is what I named him now.
Oh, that's funny.
That inner voice that's always constantly saying, why did you do that? Or, you're not good enough. You're not smart enough. Or you're not pretty enough. Who are you to be doing this? That Fred in my head. It's realizing where that's coming from, and is that really true, or is that just a story that I'm making up because of XYZ? So, that all ties into, don't abandon yourself.
I love that. And it kind of can almost make you chuckle. Like just the Fred in your head, sometimes, when you say things to yourself, you can almost chuckle for a second, kind of get over yourself, right?
Yeah.
But Veronica, you've been really vulnerable and authentic, and I really love it. And I really want to jump into the critical courage principles. But before I do, I want to ask one question. You were really authentic and vulnerable about sharing like all these things, right? And we all have things that we put up, obstacles or roadblocks, or we're afraid, right? We have fears.
Right.
So what are you doing right now that you're scared of, but you're giving yourself the power to do it anyway?
Well, continuing to speak, because it's still very scary for me, to be honest with you. I love it. It's, I'll tell you, getting up on the stage at Carnegie Hall was the scariest thing I've ever done in my life. But, and I'm looking for the next stage. And I guess the biggest fear I have is approaching people about speaking and then being rejected. So that's a scary thing to me, because that ties into the whole, oh, I'm not enough. I'm not, oh, I shouldn't be doing this. And that goes back into that whole, abuse victim mentality, right?
I mean, that is that self-talk that we give.
Absolutely.
That we give to ourselves when we're self-talking. And I understand what you're saying about Carnegie Hall. I remember like 2 years ago when I spoke at NASA.
Yes.
That was really like, for all the things that I've done, that was pretty scary for me too. But here's the thing I will tell you, from someone who people hire to pitch for them to speak, I will tell you that 9 out of 10 times, if you're pitching someone to speak and you don't get it, it has literally nothing to do with you and all to do with the technique you used for the pitch. So really don't personalize that. Everybody has a method or a format that they want. So it's really learning how they want to be pitched. It's kind of like media, right? How do they want to be pitched and stuff. And so there's techniques to use and different ways to do it and stuff. And so a lot of times people will really personalize that. So as you're doing the speaking thing now, don't personalize that, because most of that has to do with just doing that and just get better at your pitch.
Well, I'm learning that, Patty, because and the other thing I was going to say is, it is speaking, but it is media. I'm pitching to television now. So because my book just came out and my publicist were pitching to media. So, for spots on local channels. Awesome. So that's a scary proposition for me too, because now I'm not just going to be speaking, to 1,500 people or 100 or 60 or whatever you're looking at. I'm speaking to a TV, and Lord knows how many are going to be watching. So that's a scary thing.
That's exciting, though. It's scary.
It is exciting.
It is. So now let's talk about critical courage. I just like that phrase, and I noticed that you trademarked it. But tell us really a little bit about what that means. And I see that you have some principles behind it that you're actually teaching. So why don't you kind of tell us a little bit about those principles and critical courage?
Okay. It's called, the program is called Critical Courage, Roadmap to Confidence and Change. And what it's about is about self-discovery. It is about the self-discovery and who you really are, why you do what you do, and why you make the choices you do, and what choices have you made that you need to change, or what do you want in your life that you need to change. So there are 3 steps to it. There's what I call the discovery chain, and that's basically we go through and we find out values, beliefs, and we name what those beliefs and what those values are, and who you have shown up as in the past, and where that is. And then the second part of it is called break the boomerang, because we all know what a boomerang does. We throw it out there and then it comes right back to us. So basically, when you have beliefs and values that you're unconscious of, and a lot of that is unconscious beliefs that stories we made up about our past, or what has happened to us, or some experience we have had, we react and we don't really know that we're making a decision based on that belief. So it's about breaking any limiting beliefs that are holding us back from our next step or our next. And then the third thing is fail forward is the action piece. It's taking the actions to make those changes. And it's all about failing, because if you fail, that just means you have a different path. If you fail at it, then you have to try something else.
Well, you're just that much closer to success every time.
Absolutely. So that's basically what the Critical Courage program is going to be, and that launches in February.
Oh, I love that. And then your book, The Other Side of Pain, we'll make sure that we have a link to that in the show notes, but we will also have a link to a free chapter so you can check it out first. So that's kind of really exciting. Thank you so much for that gift. That's really a great gift. So Veronica, how can people connect with you?
Well, I have all the social media is out there: Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram. I'm at Know Your Power 365, and Know Your is UR Power 365. That's my at those social media junctions. And then VeronicaCrystalYoung.com is my website. And my book, of course, so you'll have in the link, it's theothersideofpain.com is for my book.
Fabulous. So now we're at the portion of the show that I like to call the open mic portion. This is my version of social karaoke. This is where I ask you to share. The name of the show is the Marketing, Media, and Money Show. And this is where I'd really like you to share your best marketing, media, or money strategy with the audience. So I'm going to hand the mic over to you right now. And if you could just share, what has really worked for you? What's that, secret that has really worked for you that might be a benefit to my audience as well?
Well, I like to choose 3 things.
Okay.
Basically to pursue my, creative dreams and passion along at the same time as building my speaking and coaching business, my production company, and holding down a corporate job, which I do all. So the first thing is take time to recharge with your personal passions. Make that time to fuel your soul, to ground in what you really love. And most of the time it's going to be something creative, because we all know we're passionate about our businesses, right? But sometimes that's in the work category. And it may not be for some people, but that's great. But I'm talking about creatively. Is it painting? Is it singing? Is it walking in nature, which is huge for me? I love that, which is why I created TV Artscapes, right? The nature series DVDs. So just take that time to really recharge your life. And that can come from actually just sitting in silence as well. So that's the first thing. Take time to recharge. Second thing is pay attention to your intuition. A lot of times we have an intuition about something, and then that Fred in your head starts talking about, oh, well, what about this? Well, what about that? But, you know, usually our first intuition about something can be correct. And it's just all the Fred in your head that comes afterwards that makes us change our mind. And then after we've done something, we're like, oh man, I remember thinking this in the beginning and I didn't listen to my intuition. And listen to that knot in your stomach about what you really wanted to do. And always ask yourself when you have intuition about, and you have that Fred in your head, what is that inner voice really trying to tell me? What does it really mean? And then be honest with it, because honesty is the biggest thing when you're talking about intuition and or that Fred that's coming in and saying, oh, well, what about this? What about that? Just be honest about what it really means. You know, many times we make up what a situation means and it's not really based on reality. So that's the other thing. Pay attention to intuition. And the third thing is own that you are the driver of your destiny. It's not about blaming anybody. It's not about judging anybody. Just be honest about where you are now, today, why you are where you are now, and where you want to get to. Where do you want to get to next? And give yourself the grace, as we talked about earlier, if you are not where you are, and begin today on the steps to be who you want to be. It's never too late. I always say it's never too late to be who you want to be. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Veronica. I really appreciate it. This has been a great podcast. I appreciate you really sharing some, hard stuff. And we were really vulnerable on this show, and I love it. And I really appreciate you coming on and being so not just generous with your brilliance, but really being generous with your story as well. So I really appreciate you being here today. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. And thank you, Patty, and continue to do the great work you're doing. Love you to death. And thank you to all the listeners, and everyone have a great 2020.
I love that. So everybody, if you enjoyed today's episode, please like, subscribe, and review the podcast on your favorite listening platform. Make sure to join us on Facebook in the Marketing Media Money Magazine podcast and event Facebook group. And to everyone, until the next episode, have a phenomenal day. If your day isn't phenomenal, change it.
Thank you for joining us today on the Marketing, Media, and Money podcast. To shorten your learning curve even more, make sure to grab your free copy of the Marketing, Media, and Money magazine at www.marketingmediamoney.com. I promise your business will thank you.